to have you here. Let's talk about Tommy and recap what he went through and the fact that they are now trying to put him back in prison right now. So thank you for coming and visiting with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Obviously, it's been incredible working with Tommy, and it's so sad seeing what's been happening to him in the last few months. It's not something that we ever expected to actually happen. We didn't expect, given the massive spectacle that he had become in the mainstream media and the news, for him to, he basically became massive over about 6 months, and we thought he was too big to fail. If everyone's watching, then they can't slip you out the back door. They can't sneak you away because everyone is around you and everyone's going to stop that from happening. And no one could believe what happened 3 months ago when he was swept away off the streets and tried in a kangaroo court and basically, hopefully to the establishment, never seen again. Obviously, massive social pressure got him out of that situation. There were protests almost weekly in Britain. There were riots about to break out. We saw people chasing police horses. It got taken to the highest court in Britain, and the whole thing got thrown away. They found inaccuracies, inconsistencies, the fact that he wasn't allowed to see his lawyer, ridiculous things.
Wasn't he like sentenced like in an hour and then in jail 2 hours later?
Yeah, I said that on your show, and people were like, oh, actually it was 54 minutes, not 32 minutes or something. It doesn't matter. It was still in the sake of minutes. It's completely insane. And the top judge in Britain, which is the same as your, the head of the Supreme Court, basically, in London, turned around and said that this whole thing is a shambles. It's ridiculous. It needs to be thrown out. It should never happen in a democratic society. And people kind of rejoiced. People thought it was great. People thought we could calm down now. But it's created a slightly dangerous situation because I think people have become kind of complacent at this point. They think, well, he's safe. He's back with his family. But on the 4th or the 5th of next month, which is only a couple of weeks away, he's going to be taken back to court, and the entire trial is going to be put through again. So he has to go through that entire process again. His family have to go through that again. He has no certainty. He doesn't know whether he's going to be in jail.
Let's be clear. They said that proceeding was a fraud, but a new judge, a new court could send him right back.
Yeah, well, there's a court date. It's going to be reheard, and we don't know what's going to happen. Whether it's going to be house arrest, whether it's going to be total freedom, whether he's going to go back to solitary confinement. Nobody knows what's going to happen. You can't live your life like that. You can't plan anything. You can't build anything. You can't pull anything together, which is exactly what they want. I don't think he'll spend a huge amount of time in prison if this happens again. I don't think the country will stand for it, but I'm really, really worried that he could be sent back even for a short period of time, which he won't be able to stand. I mean, the situation they put him in prison more recently was even worse than when he was in the EDL in 2012 and 13.
Let's spend a few minutes, because you're the expert beyond. I mean, he's the expert. Next to him, you're the expert. Talk about what Tommy's gone through already, economically, prison a year, putting general population be attacked. I mean, the guy's a real hero. Let's talk about what he's been through.
Well, he grew up in Luton as an average, everyday guy who cared about his country. He witnessed, which is the first part of his horrendous experience of watching his town turn to radical Islamification. He watched as tens of thousands of Muslims moved into his area and basically started a race war. There were cars being burned. There were massive raids.
Just like Sweden today.
He said that there wasn't somebody you didn't know that had been affected by it. Imagine that on every single street corner, on every single house, all of your neighbors having experienced something like that, having had a friend who experienced it, or a cousin, or
it's like the Vikings invading.
Yeah. So that's the first turmoil that he experienced. Obviously, that led him straight into activism, started the EDL, street movement. The police immediately started clamping down on that because it galvanized far too many people. It caused too much noise, so they would harass his family, take pictures of them, turn up at his house at 2 o'clock in the morning. This has been going on for almost a decade. There's so many reports where they would just turn up at his house and say, sorry, we're seizing all your cameras, we're seizing all your computers, we're seizing all of your assets. You can't set foot in this street centre, you can't set foot in London for 6 months. They would do it to anyone, Kevin Carroll, who was his cousin, who was also associated with the EDL. So this is happening to family members. Him personally, he's been through massive, massive pressure from the police, from the government, and from the media, from a young age, from mid-20s. Obviously, he kept on fighting. He said that that's his duty.
That which didn't kill him only made him stronger.
It did, and more people started to watch. So when he started with Rebel Media, and when he started making more and more content and exposing what was going on in Britain, more people galvanized, and the media and the police started to get really worried again. Obviously, in 2013, he was thrown in jail, and that silenced him. He actually didn't have an internet presence back then, because you know how it is in 2012, 2011. There isn't really a big internet thing in the UK. I mean, the internet's kind of for specialists back then. You know, people weren't using it in the mainstream as they are now. So to make someone disappear wouldn't really have a massive social impact, because the only platform they had before was on the street or on the mainstream media. Those are the two places. Now he has the internet. So that's the third era with Tommy, which is from the street to the web. He had the entire global audience watching him. He was creating political change. He was probably influencing elections in the UK to the point where people were voting for parties that he was supporting or talking about, and galvanizing tens of thousands of people with a click of his finger. That's not something that we've seen before in the UK in decades, and that terrified the establishment again, and that's why he was recently thrown in prison.
We'll talk about why that happened, but he's now been officially, like Martin Luther King level, put into the martyr column. And now I look at the police and the government now, when they see him, you can see palpable fear, because he's a pure-hearted guy. He's not he loves all the African immigrants and the Sikhs and everybody. He doesn't care what color you are. Just don't want to enslave women. Don't be anti-Western. And as long as you want to assimilate, we love you. I do too. And they're so afraid of his purity.
Yeah, this is why Gerard Barton, the leader of UKIP, compared him to Nelson Mandela in terms of his treatment. Thrown in prison, walked out of prison as a martyr. Not obviously to the crimes of Nelson Mandela, who was a terrorist.
Necklace people and murdered white farmers. Yeah,
him and his wife, his lovely wife, but
Winnie.
Yes, who was celebrated by MPs for her when it was her birthday.
Tommy never put tires around kids' heads, and mainly black heads, and put gasoline and lit them on fire.
Oh, well, he did far worse as a crime in Britain, which was to report on things like that. See, in the UK, it's much worse to report on a crime like that than to actually do it. People are more upset, MPs in the establishment are more upset at Tommy for reporting on things like female genital mutilation than the people who are doing female genital mutilation. Of 20,000 cases, none have been prosecuted. But he's been prosecuted for talking about it.
Before we get back to Tommy and then your travels, your travails around the world, and the amazing stuff you've done, because you're a smart guy too, and you've been in the trenches with Tommy for years. When you look at the genital mutilation, you look at the acid attacks, and you look at the stonings, and you look at in Germany the murders of wives that go, I'm not wearing this burqa, and then you turn in, it's like burqa Barbie, and it's the liberal thing. You know, SADIQ Khan, the mayor of London, says, don't wear a swimsuit. We're banning swimsuit ads on government buildings and buses. That's half the space. But a burqa's okay. It's like, look, okay. A woman's a slave. Maybe she's not. She's wearing a burqa. I'll ignore it. I go to the mall now. I see burqas. But then a woman can't wear a frickin' bathing suit? That is, because we're protecting the women? That is obscene.
There's a huge glamorization of burqas in the UK. Like, people think it's a very glamorous, cool, trendy thing. Not the fact that women are stoned to death for not wearing it in Saudi Arabia. That women, who
are put to death for trying to drive their own car.
Some of them come to the UK to escape that, and they witness this, which is the glamorization of the very thing that led them to fled.
Well, that's the thing. I'm like a right-wing libertarian Christian. My women are totally spoiled. They run everything. And then I hear like these people that put women in slavery, they're telling me how to treat a woman when I love women. I don't even get it anymore.
Yeah, it's really sad. But what you get accused of, the same thing that Tommy and I get accused of, is, well, why are men deciding what women do anyway? So you telling a woman that she doesn't have to wear a burqa, that it's maybe not the best idea to wear a burqa, is the same as the Saudi Arabian men for stoning them to death.
But she's being made to wear the burqa.
Yes, but they don't understand nuances or context, or they do understand them and more scarily.
So is this woman being liberated about to be stoned to death? Let's put it back on screen. Let's put it back on screen. Yeah, this is like what Afghanistan, about to stone a woman to death in her own grave. Like, I mean, it's not like some virtue selling to women. I love men, women, everybody. Killing women for not wearing a hood over their head really pisses me off.
Well, Europe has been very safe and very cushy for a long time. A lot of people don't seem to think that this sort of stuff exists. They see the pictures, they see the videos, and they think, no, that can't be real. That can't be real. The world can't.
But it's only 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
And it's about to have 3 billion people. It's 1.8 billion. We're not having kids, and it says we're gonna eat you.
It's 1,000.
Your daughters will be under this, and I'm like, I'm not gonna. Oh, you're a bad person.
Well, it's about to be 20 miles away for them. They've imported it. It's about to start taking place in their country.
Now, but here's Spain, like 100 miles away from North Africa.
Yep.
I agree. You're right. They've imported it. It's like God.
Yeah. Well, they will have to see massive, terrible things happen to women in Europe before they actually start changing anything, which is such a shame. They're basically going to be facilitating women being murdered, raped, and killed.
Remember Cologne? There's been thousands of cases since 2 years ago on New Year's where hundreds of women were raped by Islamic rape gangs, and the local mayor, who's a Green Party lady, said, don't wear short skirts, it's your fault. The very thing feminists always claimed. She says, don't wear short skirts, it's your fault you got raped.
The head of the police for Sydney, when Lauren and I went to a no-go zone recently, said that she can't walk past the local mosque, or she can't walk through the town centre because she might cause a riot. She might incense the men, the Muslim men. That's strange. This women blaming, which
she's a good-looking blonde,
because she's Lauren Southern. She's a good-looking blonde, but she also doesn't like Islam. So they're very, very happy to blame women for all of this and to say, oh, you know, you're the ones who are inciting these, when their entire core is supposed to be the opposite of that. But they do it whenever it pleases them, which is why they blamed Lauren for Muslims, radical Muslims, wanting to kill her for criticizing Islam. That video is on her channel. It's completely blatant. We filmed the police officer saying it. But the same thing keeps happening in Britain. It's such a shame that it's creeping across continents and Western societies in every single level. Who knew there would be a no-go zone in Sydney? So
they would deny him just a few years ago. Now they admit him. So how does flaming Islam get green-lighted and worshipped by the left? What do you think's behind that?
I think it's two things. One is genuinely a fear. A lot of people in the media and a lot of people in the government are genuinely terrified of a race war. They're genuinely terrified of the Muslims rising up through the ranks and taking over the streets, which could very well happen. We know in the UK that the imams...
So it's appeasement.
Imams control areas of Britain, not the police. The police work very closely with the imams. This is all public information. This isn't a conspiracy. They control massive areas. There was that arrest. Did you hear about this, where a Muslim guy in a town near Bradford threw a brick at a police officer? The police arrested him. The imam walked into the police station and said, release that man right now. And they said, well, we can't just release someone at will. And he said, release that man or I'll bring 200 Muslims to this police station and we'll burn down the town.
So the fact is, Westerners are compliant, very passive, because we're in this Northern European thing of working together, like a individual collectivism. And so now the Muslims aren't playing along with it. So the fact that they're willing to stand up shows in the land of a bunch of wimps, the guys that are willing to stand up are king.
Well, we've abandoned, men in the West have abandoned the collectivism. They've abandoned coming together and, you know, treating each other as brothers and going, because they don't go to church anymore, they don't go to pubs anymore, they don't congregate anymore, they don't have any sense of identity or collectivism anymore. But the Muslims do. If a fight starts in Luton, Tommy said this, and it's a white guy versus a Muslim, hundreds, even thousands of Muslims will pour out of the butchers, the lawyer shop, the catering stores, everywhere. They'll pour out of everywhere and all join in to defend themselves. And it's like there's a huge, powerful collectivism. The same thing happened when the Roman Empire fell. You had stronger societies started gathering around.
They brought the Germans, the Gauls, and it was their fall.
Well, the Romans started accepting things like transgenderism, and they lost faith in themselves, and they lost collectivism. They lost identity and the things that binded them together, which every species of animal even needs. And that's what Westerners have done, and they're going to have to learn that the hard way. I mean, it's going to end seriously badly for them. They're all scattering around in their own little circles, you know, trying to find identity by buying Apple and Samsung and Gucci and Louis Vuitton and trying to identify themselves with brands because they don't know anything else.
But the real identity is exactly what they stand for and who they are. Well,
they can't be proud of their nation. They can't fall under the umbrella of nationalism. They can't fall under the umbrella of Christianity or being a man. All of that's been thrown out.
So they fall under the umbrella of rolling over to the most radical, dirty, backward, oppressive, throw gays off buildings. I mean, it's true. It's like I see Tim Cook saying, oh, we're watching Jones, we may ban him. And he goes to some gay pride parade, so it's okay. But literally, he supports China that kills gay people. And it's like, I'm not even virtue signaling. It's like, who kill anybody for what they do? But it's like he's managing me saying I'm this immoral person when he's super immoral with slave factories.
Yeah, and it's happening all up and down the UK. People have just lost faith in themselves and lost faith in the country. A lot of people just don't think there's anything worth preserving. Why try and preserve this? Why try and preserve our society and be civilized? A lot of them have just become pessimistic.
Because they teach us to hate ourselves.
Yeah, so they don't think there's anything worth losing. They think, well, these guys have a better culture than us. They're much cooler.
Why are they fleeing that then if it's so good?
They probably, I don't know what they don't even think about those things. I wouldn't say they think about why they're leaving.
Sure, it's surrender then.
Yeah, it is surrender. You can see it. You can see the men who walk the streets of London now, and you can compare it to old archived footage of London in the 1960s and 50s. It's a different breed of man. It's a different breed of society who actually cared about itself and actually was worried about its own destruction. The men who fought and died for Britain in World War II and World War I and for the last 1,000 years are obviously irrelevant now.
Well, the Romans couldn't conquer them.
Yeah. Well,
now they're just...
Yeah, it's really, really sad. I was in Vienna a few days ago, and we went to visit a massive cathedral, and the bells from the cathedral, the tour guide told me, were made from the cannons that the Ottomans and the Muslim empires used when they were stopped at the gates of Vienna in the 1600s. When they lost, they melted all the cannons down and they turned it into church bells. And every time the church bell rang in Vienna, it was made from the sound of the loss of the Ottoman Empire's cannons. And Europe has such an incredible history of defending itself and maintaining its nationalism and its pride. And seeing the second invasion is from within. And I don't think it can be stopped.
To see the traitors within.
I don't think it can be stopped. Europe is probably going to end up with a few white sort of Christian or culturally European enclaves in the next few hundred years that exist, a little bit like Orania in South Africa. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, we're going to get to that next. In fact, get into your world travels, because this is important. Tommy Robinson's main producer here with us right now. Get into this, because this is important, what you've experienced in your world travels.
Well, so many liberals and so many people in Britain sneer and say, oh, you're not very well traveled. You don't really know what's going on. Where do you get your news from social media? Being well traveled, and I've gone all over the world, almost every continent with Lauren and Tommy and with film crews, has actually made me realize how much worse it really is. It actually confirms it. It's not confirmation bias. It's not that you're going there with an idea. It
doesn't make you feel elite that you are more advanced in some cases. It makes you feel depressed, right? Like, because you see it doesn't make you feel good that these places are so fallen.
No, it's shocking to see, because there's a lot of fake news. There's fake news on the right and there's a lot more fake news on the left. But a lot of news is associated with fake news. But to actually go around and see the world and see what's happening on the ground basically authenticates everything that you guys have said and the right. It's really, really bad. Actually worse, because there aren't a lot of reporters there on the ground. A lot of countries, in South Africa, you get banned like Katie Hopkins if you even talk about it. So things are way more serious than even a lot of people are talking about. And it's being well traveled is what I would encourage anyone to do. If you want to find out information, go to the source, go and see what's happening. Anywhere you go, it will pretty much confirm your worst beliefs, which is what Lauren said as well. She was really shocked. We kind of wanted to take everything we saw online with a pinch of salt. Even with InfoWars. I mean, InfoWars.
By the way, I'm watching. There's one article on a print, so I'm going to go out for 2 minutes. You keep going. No, seriously, because we've got Tommy Robinson's producer here, Kaylin Robertson. We'll tell you how to get to him. All of it right now. We're in about 10 more minutes here. When I get into what Tommy's facing, the fact I want to put him back in prison, what's happening. I'm going to run out here and put one more article I want, but get into the world tour you just did. Australia, South Africa, all of it. Go over it for us. I'll be right back. Keep going.
Yeah, well, this is what we said about InfoWars. I mean, even when I was a little bit younger, a lot of people would call this organization, a lot of similar organization, fake news and ridiculous and loud because he used capital letters and things like this. But it completely authenticated all of it. It's really sad what's happening in the UK, what's happening in South Africa, what's happening in Australia. It doesn't seem like any of it's going to improve anytime soon. I think the only country that's probably going to strive and move on and be an actual success is probably going to be the USA, because they've actually elected someone who seems to care about their people, who seems to care about their borders, and who seems to care about what's actually best for the people of America. Whereas Europe doesn't have anything like that. It hasn't seen anything like that for so long. It hasn't seen any strong leaders probably in the last few decades. Maybe in UK since Thatcher, maybe in Paris. I can't even name when the last time they had something like that. But they're horrified. Europe is horrified by the idea of Trump and the idea of a leader that actually cares about their people, which shows just how far they really have gone if they're horrified by someone who uses pretty normal and standard rhetoric. Trump doesn't sound like a megalomaniac or like a complete psychopath or like someone who you can even compare to Hitler. But when you have someone class regular, standard, reasonable language as extreme, then you've gone down a very, very dark path. Then you've become extreme yourself. And that's the world that I live in. That's the world that I see in London. I moved to London in 2012. As a teenager, was very excited by the idea of this great metropolitan safe city. And just watching it fall apart was one of the most heartbreaking things ever. And it's something that is extremely difficult to even talk about or to even go through. Moving to London and watching the change from 2012 to 2018 was one of the biggest parts of my political awakening. It was completely safe. It actually statistically was one of the safest Western cities in the world, far safer than any city in America, which everyone boasted about. I remember there was a battle.
And now it's more dangerous than New York.
Oh yes, which is new. And in this country, you're allowed to carry guns, and in the UK, you aren't. And it's
so. What do you think the big global corporate end game is? We know they don't want any culture that's own. They want to have this reverse colonialism to drive down wages. They admit that, but the average idiot going along with this is going to be so destructive. I can look forward 20 steps. The master plan of this, it's almost like the elites that run the West saw it as dominant, so they want to dominate it to feel dominant, but they're blowing up the engine of their own power. It literally seems like a major pissing contest. Who do you think runs this thing? I mean, who would do something like this to like say, we're feminists, we're liberals, we're going to bring in radical Muslims that cut women's genitals off and throw gays off buildings, and we're going to let them acid attack and rape whoever they want, and then it's all over Europe, Sweden, you name it, Stockholm Syndrome, and invasion ships crashing in thousands an hour, and you're just like, and Soros funds them. It's like a video game. It's like, what does Soros want? Jesus.
Oh yeah, it would be impossible for me to name people, but I know that there are societies, there's people who go to Bilderberg, there's people who go to ski.
I'm saying, you're a smart guy. What is their end game? I mean, we know it's world government, but why would they do this?
Power and influence, money, safety, security for their family, security for...
So they just don't like successful middle class.
They don't like anything that might stand in the way between them and world domination. That's what I think.
But don't they get like, if you destroy everything beautiful or strong or pure or original, you've paved your own destruction?
No, if you destroy anything beautiful or good, then you take away anything for the people to fight for. If you take away something... That's it. Yes.
That's why they did ugly architecture, all of it.
Yeah, they want to take away anything worth fighting for.
So they want our soul.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, they want look at the architecture of communism. That's a great scenario. That's a great example. Bleak, cold, shuddering,
oppressive.
Yeah. And that's all intentional. If you make a society completely bland, completely bleak, completely meaningless, with no history, with no heritage, with no color, with no individual, with nothing, then they will submit to you entirely. And if you do that globally, then they'll submit to you entirely, and you'll have global power, global influence forever. Humans are susceptible to this. That's
why I fight them, because I've asked the question: are you just overriding things? So this is a racial program, and then something better comes. They go, no, it's like 1984. Orwell was a socialist, high level, and Eric Blair, and they finally go, no, the plan is dominating and hurting humanity and having power and pettiness. And he went, well, forget this. That's the thing. There's not like they're overriding everybody to build something better. They just hate stuff that's beautiful.
Oh yeah, of course they do. It's why they are demolishing churches in France right now. There's videos of that. I don't know if you've seen them with the bulldozer.
Oh yeah, they love it. Well, they make a mosque.
Yes, or a car park. I think they made one of them a car park. It's incredibly sad, because you're seeing the culture stripped from Europe, like nail varnish just completely stripped away, and anything that was beautiful, and a lot of stuff eradicated from history as well. This is what the South Africans did. If you look at some of the universities in South Africa, they stopped teaching a huge amount of the good, that the good stuff from their historical past.
Oh, the left is demanding everywhere, no more classical literature.
Well, if you can erase that, then it will be as if it never happened. Like, there are things that happened hundreds of years ago in human history that we never know about.
Pass on the knowledge, or it's cut off.
Oh, then as if it never happened, which is how you gain influence and power, which is exactly what they're doing now. You'll start to see the education curriculum change very, very rapidly over the next 10, 20 years, which will conveniently exclude lots of the greatness of the British Empire in Britain or the greatness of Americans and the things that they've achieved, so that the class, so that they feel...
No, but you're having the Democrats like Governor Cuomo jump the shark when he says, America was never great and it will never be great. He's saying you'll never be great. Well, obviously America isn't perfect, but compared to other countries, it's been great. Great Britain's been great. People know that. They all fight to get there. But imagine someone saying it's never been great and you will never be great. That's a freaking cult, man. I mean, that is like a declaration of war.
Well, you have to make people feel ashamed of their heritage and their history so that they think there's nothing to lose and nothing worth fighting for. You have to do that from a young age. And as soon as you achieve that, then you can make them do whatever you want, make them believe whatever you want. America not...
No, I agree. So what is the rewrite? They're wiping it out, but then I see the rewrite, it's stuff even worse.
Oh, I haven't even looked into what they're rewriting. But the main thing is just that they're stripping it away. I mean, they're introducing Black history studies in the UK in a lot of universities, and history about other cultures, about the civil rights movement and things like that, which is fine to include in history if it's balanced, but it's
all directed on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, look at the films that Hollywood are bringing out every single year. Most of
every movie is the whites are all devils.
Yes.
And then when an illegal alien rapes a woman or shoots a woman, they say, "Oh, we're not showing that on the news."
Well, it's easy. It's not very. They all think it's brave as well to bash whites. They're like, "Oh, we're going against the thing." Everyone wants to be a 1960s civil rights.
And it's all a bunch of whites. Like take them taking down Silent Sam at the university. I mean, both sides were manipulated in that war. And the point was the South fought 3 to 4 to 1. And I wish a civil war wouldn't have happened. But the idea of like pulling down a monument and flipping out about it, it's just craziness.
Oh, well, they think it impresses all their, minority friends, and they can feel like king of the castle. Oh, I've impressed everyone. I'm so great. And I'm king of all the minorities.
Meanwhile, most minorities are really a majority. They're just like, I just want a job and be friendly.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to be inducted into this.
Well, white liberals think they know best for everybody. They are actually the real colonialists. They're the real
colonizing mind.
Yes, they are. Well, they're the only group that want the whole world to have the exact same standards, say the same human rights standard, the same hate speech standards of everybody else. Trudeau, Macron, they're the ultimate colonizers. But the minority just want to get on with it. Most people just want to get on with it.
So what do you think? Because you're a smart guy. What do you think ends up happening then as nationalism and self-determination wakes up, and the fact that these big billionaires that are funding all this communism and socialism, they're all tax exempt and exempt from it, and have diplomatic immunity? What do you, your gut level, what happens?
Well, in America, they become diminished. The people who have pushed a lot of this, they have less power, less reach. People take them less seriously. When social justice warriors and communists speak, they are taken with less weight. They aren't given airtime. That happens when America becomes more patriotic and people listen to people like Trump more. In Europe, it will never happen. Even if nationalism comes back, it will be for a brief moment. It's already given up on itself. But I think America will strive and be the future for the West in a way that people care about this country more than people care about their own country in Europe. Probably because you guys have guns. The men here are very emasculated. And I think it's because in this country, because if someone breaks into your house, if you have a burglar, the first thing you instinctively do as a man to defend your family is to go and grab a gun and do it yourself and fight him off. In Britain, it's, oh, let me just call the police and the police will come and do it. Everyone's kind of, demasculated. You're completely reliant on the state, even for your own safety. And I think it's just created entire generations of people who don't care anymore. And I don't think nationalism... Well,
sure, because I'm not the toughest guy around, but if somebody's breaking into my house, I'm afraid for them. It's not like I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Everything kicks in. It's like, oh, I don't want to kill people, but if they're attacking my family, then the thing kicks in that does. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
That's what they don't have in Britain. It's that thing, that instinct. And so the nationalism in the UK isn't strong enough, even if it comes back, to care about itself, to be able to strive on. But I think in this country it is, because men really think there's something worth fighting for, whether it's their own family, their own lives. They have that core spirit.
Well, you say worth fighting for. It's the rolling over you can't do.
Yeah.
Like, it's this thing, like, I don't want to fight, but you know what? I'm not going to roll over.
Yeah. Well, no, that's exactly what it is. British people used to be like that. Europeans used to be like that, in the wartime, a long time ago.
So what happened? Was it the European wars killed so many, or?
Oh, I think massive infiltration from other cultures, I think. whites in Europe have something, I don't know what it is, what's wrong with it. They have a self-destructive gene, it seems, where they become powerful and then they become comfortable and then they become weak and then they become taken over. It's happened with Greek empires, it's happened with all of them. And we're
the Romans, all of them.
They're at
the height of power and they just decide to sell out.
Well, they get to this level of like opulence. You know, in the UK, it's basically a socialist country. You get unlimited welfare, you get unlimited housing, and if you want to order any takeaway from any country in the world, you can just call up a phone. You can have the same living standards now than men in castles who ran the country.
So like you said on my show today, it's what Victor Hugo said, adversity makes men and prosperity makes monsters. It's just they don't get that they're living off the gas other people put in the tank.
The fumes of greater civilizations is what they're living off, which is what Lauren says. And it's completely true. But they forget about it. They're living as bourgeoisie. Everybody is in the country, basically, where they think because we have all of these resources, there is this idea where there's limitless money, limitless assets. We can help the world. We can save the world, bring in as many people as possible. Everyone can be like us. We can have unlimited everything. And it's an intoxicated state that everybody's in, a sedated state of wealth. And Europeans get themselves in this situation every few hundred years, maybe every 1,000 years. And it's very strange. And they never recover from it. Americans haven't done this. I think they're a different breed. But in Britain, it's really at the final stages of the empire before it closes down. And they've done it to themselves. They're the ones who imported all of this. They're the ones who have brought it all in, and it's really depressing. There's a lot of good people who don't want this to happen. There's
the inferiority complex. Like if groups are brought in, like if I was brought into a superior culture, I would like try to join with it and be strong within it. If something's better, I'll adopt it. But instead, there's this chip on the shoulder, and they just hating everything, and then everyone like greasing the skids for it.
Yeah, it's what Tommy said. He said you'd walk down the street in Luton, and the black kids would walk around with their heads held high. They'd be proud of being black. The Jamaican kids would say, "Oh, I'm Jamaican." The Muslim kids, "Oh, I'm from Pakistan." But the white kids would always walk around with their heads down, and they would never feel proud of much. And that's something that's been pushed on them. It's a mentality that's developed over this bourgeoisie stage. But it's a shame because the people who are a victim of it now aren't the people who legislated this, and they aren't people who pushed this.
You know why, though? There's an ice age evolution where if you got home 10 minutes late, you'd freeze to death. If you didn't communally work together, you were independent, but if you didn't work together for fishing or whatever and store stuff for the winter, you'd die. So that's why you go more north, they become even more socialist because they absolutely are communal. Well, the state says we do this and we are good. That's why they say the only socialism works in Northern Europe. But that's if the social compact's real. And they've gotten Northern European social compact to give into its own death. Mm-hmm. The Stockholm syndrome.
Yep.
And here are the mighty Vikings now absolutely just totally committed to their own death.
Yep.
And it's a very sad point.
Socialism is a boogeyman word in a lot of America, but socialism does work in very homogenous and very selected societies. If your society is completely...
if it's totally honorable,
totally,
and 100%, then it works great.
So it worked for like 10 years in Sweden and those countries when they
then it degenerates because people manipulate it.
Exactly. People within themselves and people who mainly have been imported who have no desire at all.
The Northern European thing is, well, it's socialist. I better work hard to make it strong.
Yep.
Other people say, oh, I'm going to lay around,
Oh, no. If you import Somalis or groups with very, very high unemployment rates and things like that into a society.
Who think it's smart, like 80% of the migrants are on welfare 5 years later, they think you're a dumbass. I'm going to exploit this.
Well,
not, we're a Northern Ice Age people from 10,000 years ago. We take care of people. They take that as a weakness.
Well, some groups of people in the world just think differently to others. There are groups of Chinese people who, it's like ant.
Well, if you're equatorial, there's plenty of food, have kids, don't worry about it. If you're 6 months out of the year below zero, you better get your act together.
Exactly. So they'll come in, they'll pinpoint like the Terminator, all the things that they can exploit, all of the cash machine ATMs of the old women that they can use to rob at night, all of the welfare states, all of the money holes. They'll pinpoint it like Terminator, and they'll take down the society, and they'll be complete leeches, which is what we've seen in the UK for decades, and it's what's happening all Europe.
Because there's not the individualism with equatorial populations.
No, and it's going to be
like the Japanese were in the Ice Age, so look how they are.
Yep.
It's like anybody in the Ice Age who got their shit together or they were dead.
Yeah, it's going to be really bad because in the UK you have massive people on welfare, same in these Nordic countries, and what's going to happen is that's going to become so massive.
Well, take the Japanese.
Collapse. During
a crime wave or a tsunami, there's zero crime. During a normal time, there's like point whatever. The lowest are like Switzerland. They don't do that because they're individuals, but this is communal. So it's not about what color you are. It's that you were up above the ice line.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's lots of different cultures and mindsets and things like that.
And they don't have any racial memory of starving to death or a total societal death where you've got a plan for 6 months to store food or you're all dead.
Yeah. And
the fermentation, the preparation, they don't get long-term planning. It's not that they don't have high IQs. They just, hey, I'm going to pick a coconut or banana off a tree.
Yep.
Why do I have to worry? So obviously the globalists then are manipulating equatorial populations against Ice Age populations, which are mutations, as they say, and all this other stuff, and high IQs and the rest of it. And so now the people that built civilization are the hunted ones. Why would the elite try to hunt that? Because they are merging with AI, and they see the Ice Age population as a threat.
That's interesting. There's so many different scenarios that I've tried to conceive as to actually.
We'll talk about those scenarios. You're a smart guy.
Well, yeah. There's that. There's obviously the power question. So there's having influence where the money is. A lot of these countries in in Europe are the ones that have had lots of power, lots of influence, and lots of money. So those are the ones that you're going to want to spend most of your time corrupting and getting yourself involved with. There's the AI thing is very interesting. It's not something I've thought about too much, but what's your perspective on that? Before
I just see a cold-blooded attempt, like you said, to control the future, and it's super racist because they're teaching all the third world populations instead of adopting positive culture, they're teaching them to hate it, and so I just see a cold-blooded corporate takeover.
Yeah, well, they're not going to focus on wanting to take over Africa, or I mean, they've looked at that in the past because they don't have as much power and influence. If you can dominate Europe, you can dominate America and the West, then you've dominated the world. I mean,
exactly. That's the targets. You get that, you win the world.
Yeah. I mean, you dominate Africa, great. You've got some gold, but you don't have much power. If you do it somewhere where there's already massive power structures, then that's where you can get ahead pretty quickly.
All right. In closing, and I appreciate your time. We're going to dinner tonight. You're here in town. We're working on some big projects with Paul Joseph Watson and others. We'll announce soon. But talk about Tommy Robinson, how you met him, how you got involved with him, and where all this is going on. Kalen Robertson, and where you think that's going to go with Tommy, and how he's facing jail again, and just at a gut level, where you think this fight goes and what we should do. Because my primitive side and my gut level says, move to New Zealand where all the elite are going. They must know something I don't know. You can't win this fight. The public's too dumb. But then I believe in humanity. I think, no, we can change that course. So just in 5 minutes, because I appreciate you talking so long, get into your worldview, what you really think where all this is going, and how we can turn this around.
Well, yeah, I met Tommy when I was kind of a liberal-leaning person. I was, moved to London in 2013, went to university, was liberal-leaning. I assumed that was the right way to be. That was the side of justice and freedom, apparently. When I started to witness things collapsing in London, and I started to witness Muslims outside my university screeching and screaming with megaphones into shops and windows that sold alcohol and pork, and trying to have them closed down, I thought that was really weird. So I decided to do a piece on it.
Well, you saw people trying to dominate you.
Yeah, I just thought it was really strange. And so I started looking into it and realized that it was happening everywhere. I started to try and talk about it in university, produced a film about it. They wouldn't show it in the classroom, thought that's strange. Then researched that 90% of UK universities in 2015 that year had also silenced speakers or free speech in some way. Thought that was very strange. So left, worked, partner and I worked at the BBC, we worked in the mainstream media, we worked in basically mainstream departments, and then left because it was excruciating and you couldn't talk about your opinions to anyone. And things were just getting really, really bad. I mean, in America, you just had the inauguration of Trump at this time. So we started an online newspaper in which we met Tommy to interview him. Got on with him amazingly well as soon as I met him. We went for lunch and just talked for hours and hours. He was looking for a little bit of direction.
Talk about Tommy. What kind of guy he is?
He was looking for some direction at the time. He had been pushed down by the state for so long. He had just discovered the internet when I met him. He had just basically got Twitter.
He was so natural and pure. He was just wandering around the streets.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, he's super smart, but he's also very childlike.
Yeah. Well, he had obviously done the EDL for years. He had always been on the ground, on the street, galvanizing people. You know, there was a mosque that was. And
I'm not putting him down saying it's childlike. That's very pure, but exactly, he's very straightforward.
Yeah, very straightforward. And that's always been his thing. Has been on the street. That's how he was brought up. That's how he grew up. He grew up on the streets. He grew up a working class lad in Luton, and that's how he did his business. That's how he got things done. Was on the street, on the ground. And so he went through a little bit of a strange thing when the EDL closed. When he left, he kind of thought, well, where do I go from here as an individual? And the internet loved him. He says the truth, and he finds things that are happening that are real and exposes them on the ground, and people who are watching it online desperately needed to see what was going on.
Well, they can't get enough.
Yeah. Because for the first time, someone's actually going out and finding this stuff and investigating it, sending people undercover, going and confronting imams who have said that women should be stoned to death, doing the stuff that British people wish they could do themselves and wish someone would do. And that's why he exploded on the internet, because he was the first to do that. And obviously grew and grew and grew. And as a person, I think the main thing that drives him is an overwhelming sense of justice. Even before he was doing political activism, he was always saying, and, you know, his family were always telling me about how he'd always, you know, if something happened to someone in his school, he'd always defend them. If someone was being bullied in his class, he'd go out and defend him too. He has this sense of justice he's always had since he was a kid. And you hear stories like that of when he was much younger and when he was a teenager and when there was things like that happening. And what sparked him into this political game was seeing his town turned upside down, was seeing neighbors of friends and daughters who had been raped and feeling an overwhelming sense of anger and just fury and just wanting justice for what was happening to those people. And that's why he's doing this. That's the underlying thing that drives him, is just wanting the right things to happen to the right people. And you can see that every time we do an interview with someone who's been affected by this, he gets upset, he cries on camera, he gets emotional. He's really driven by the emotion of a lot of this.
Because it's a globalist invasion.
Yeah, and to have an average everyday guy from Luton go through all this and witness all this is so sad. And he represents millions of other people in Britain in his own side who have been through this.
And then he goes to Italy, and then people try to attack him, he knocks him out. And the same thing in England. People get it. So where do you think it ends? Because like you said, they've tried to break him. He just wants to do the right thing. People are awake now. They get what's happening. What do you think the next chapters of Tommy Robinson are?
It's hard to tell. He sustains and he carries on through every single attack that they throw at him from every angle. I think he'll come out of this next court case fighting, and I think he's going to carry on making this content and carry on making the things that people need to see and representing the people that need to be represented. He'll be censored like you guys just have from the internet, but good always prevails. And I think the stuff that he does will always find a way. Throughout human history, people like Tommy have always been beaten down by the state or by empires or by governors, and they always find a way. Because if you have the right message and you do the right thing, it will prevail. And I think regardless of the internet, people will see what he's doing.
I agree, Caleb. Let me ask you this question. In the off chance they do kill him or put him in prison, because I get they let him out of jail because they figure, why do you think they let him out of jail? Obviously it was wrong what they did. Was that just the courts being fair, or did they realize it was backfiring? Why they let him out of jail, and what happens if they kill him? Well,
it's a mix of both of those things. It was taken to the most Supreme Court, the highest in the whole country, which is, at that case, when the whole thing becomes public about the case, then you can't do the same thing they did where they just swept him off the street. Like it shows that it was undemocratic. So the fact that it had to be escalated meant that it had to be overthrown out. So that's why they let him out, because they had to. Otherwise, people on the left and right would probably revolt when they looked at the case details, which had previously been closed.
So the same thing with us trying to ban us from the internet. Now the ACLU, Bill Maher, the president yesterday,
Yeah, well, this is what happens. That's what will happen to him. Are you asking what would happen if they take him away if he dies?
If they kill him, what do you think will happen?
Oh,
I hate to bring that up, but that's where we're at.
No, I know.
They're trying to kill him in prison.
A lot of people.
If they get him back in prison like they're trying now, that could happen.
Or on the street. I mean, look at what it goes through every time he leaves the house. There's Osmond warnings and bomb warnings at him all the time. You know, acid attack warnings on his family. If he dies, it's going to be very, very. The UK, you'll be able to feel the suspense everywhere you go. It'll be extremely, extremely hostile.
That could wake England up out of its coma. And I don't want to see that uprising, but I think it could. Once people uprise, though, I could see really bad stuff.
Oh, it's going to be extremely intense. People don't realize how bad it is. If any one of these globalists or leftists wants to see their ideology carry on or wants to see order in Britain, they better make sure he's okay. Because if he isn't, they're all going to get taken down. I think the UK will completely...
Oh, people will hunt them.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen. It's like, the thing is about the left, they start fights, like they punch you in the face.
Yep.
And then when you fight back, they're like, oh my God, stop.
Yeah. No, people... Well, look at the way they reacted when he was just put in prison. And he was in solitary confinement when people were chasing those police. And did you see the footage of the police just running? We took over the whole of Downing Street. That was when he was safe in solitary confinement. Can you imagine if something actually happens to him? It will be that on a scale unheard of, and it will be global as well. We had protests in Australia and across Europe. People will be flying into the UK. It will be catastrophic for anyone who is involved in it.
Well, it's like Tommy is the ghost of Europe, and we're not against other groups. I'm not a white supremacist. I want everybody to have power. But the fact that leftists have made all these other groups racist, it's like Tommy Robinson is like the ghost of Europe. And if they kill Tommy Robinson, it becomes a Christ-like figure. And I think the establishment realizes he's ready to die. I think that's what scares him.
Oh, yeah. He is. He's actually briefly mentioned things like that before. He said if it happens, you know, he'll have done it fighting on the firing line of Britain. You know, men go out at war, World War II. They do it right now, and they die in the front line. And what he does is pretty much on the front line, facing that every
this
day.
Is 21st century warfare. You just said it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mr. Robertson, for reporting for Tommy Robinson, what else do you want to add in closing here about what people should know about the world, Australia, what you've witnessed, what you've seen?
Well, the closing of what I was saying earlier was a lot of people look at InfoWars, a lot of people look at the alternative media, and they say that it's fake news. I thought that as well for a short while, but about a year ago, because you do, it just seems too bad to be true. It just seems
they just say, oh yeah,
it just seems too extreme. But if you travel like I have and you actually see what's happened, it completely authenticates everything you guys have said and everything the right has said, and it's really, things are really bad, and we shouldn't be complacent. We shouldn't be complacent.
Well, if you go to South Africa and you want to empower people, and now multinationals have replaced the apartheid, and it's 10 times worse. You're not endorsing the old. You're like, let me help you. They're like, no, I want to kill you. And it's like, you're like, whoa, at a certain point, I'm intellectual, I'm spiritual, I'm smart. And I've got to realize at a certain point, I can't project who I am onto you.
Yep.
I wish you wanted to be free with me, like Martin Luther King. You don't want it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's about not being complacent, and it's about realizing the tactics that are being used against us. You know, when Trump was elected, everyone thought, we've won. It's good. The battle's over. But it's just beginning. This is in the very early stages to be able to figure all this out and to be able to fight what's going on to the people of the West. And it's going to be a very scary future.
Well, I'm impressed with the work you're doing and your videography. Tell me about, just in closing, some of the other great crew that have been helping Tommy. I know he's one of his wife and kids. I've seen some of the photos and talked to some of his family. I've called him. This is just a regular guy who saw them literally recruiting 10-year-old girls for sex slavery at his little tanning shop next door to the kebab shop. And he'd see him putting 12-year-old girls in cars to go be raped. And he started kicking people's asses. And I mean, that's like manly. That's like America or Britain. That's everything.
Yeah. Well, it's a man who sees injustice and tries to stop it. Like we expect every Western man to do when he sees something happen, especially to women and daughters and sisters and children. when any man sees something like that happen, there should be an inner fire inside him that erupts, every Western man, to fight and save for what's good in the world, because there has been so much evil and there has been so much turmoil, and it's only going to be fought by good men like Tommy, and good men who will be willing to put themselves on the line to speak out and to do everything they can to save this, basically, sadness and this evil from taking over.
The vacuum of letting evil in closing. Tommy Robinson, just, I mean, how scared is the corrupt globalist government of him? They are so scared of him right now. Terribly scared.
They let him out. They escalated it. They have really upped their game in terms of trying to shut him down. That shows how scared somebody is in terms of how much effort they are to silence their enemies. That's just an indication of it. Look at the press secretary was saying about him. Tommy was mentioned in Parliament a couple of times. Everyone was booing and shouting. You know, he went for dinner with an MP a couple of months ago, and everyone in Parliament was complaining that he was even allowed near the building. They're terrified of him. And that's proved by their behavior in all of this. And so...
And was there any, as I imagine they've done this to me, like when he was in prison, did they ever say, hey, capitulate? Any word on that? Like, hey, give in, we'll leave you alone?
I don't know. I haven't spoken to him enough about it. He's a little bit different since he came out. He's a lot more quiet. He's obviously been diagnosed with PTSD. He is really needed to spend this time with his family. As soon as
how do we know they're not jacking with his food? That's another thing.
Well, that's why. What now? Or in prison?
Before.
Well, that's why he ate that food in prison out of tin cans, because the only thing that he knew was safe was that what he could open himself from a tin can, which is why he was eating what he was eating, because the Muslims would poison food otherwise. So we can't eat at Middle Eastern restaurants or anything like that. Definitely not, because he'll be poisoned in prison or outside as soon as.
Believe me, I've experienced it. Yeah. That's the thing is, we don't act like these people do, and you think you're gonna fight these folks, and I see people that live on the fumes, like you said, of what our forebears did, and they have no idea just how serious it is. Well, where can people follow? I know the Twitter, whatever, Facebook, whatever, but Tommy Robinson official site. Where do people, Mr. Robertson, where do they go to follow the great work you're doing?
Well, I'm going to centralize all of the work that's going to be happening over the next few months just on that Twitter account on @KaelinRob. To follow Tommy's stuff, head to his YouTube channel. Just type in Tommy Robinson channel for as long as that's there. I mean, he doesn't have Twitter, so but
they banned him there.
Anytime something happens, I'll put everything up on that Twitter account, and that's where you can find out any developments.
Because the establishment thinks you're stupid. They think if they ban him off Twitter or Facebook, you won't find it. No, you'll find Tommy Robinson. You'll find Kaelin Robertson. You'll find the work of Tommy Robinson. You'll find the work of Kaelin Robertson. You'll find it all there. You'll find what's happening at Infowars.com. And that's what it really comes down to. What an epic fight. All right. Thanks for doing this live hour-plus broadcast. Very, very powerful. Thank you for coming in with us.
Thanks for having me, Alex.